Hey everybody, welcome to Mental Health Monday. We're so excited to have our dear friend Dufflyn Lammers here, and she's going to be talking about love addiction. But before we get started with Dufflyn's presentation, I'm just going to do our regular preamble and an invitation. Welcome. You probably don't see me on this video, but I'm Dawn Nickel, and I'm actually the founder of She Recovers, and I'm delighted to do these Monday morning sessions. At least it's morning here on the West Coast. So my name is Dawn Nickel, and my pronouns are she, her, and I live in Victoria, British Columbia, and I'm in recovery from all of the things. So thank you so much for joining us for this She Recovers Mental Health Monday. Our foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit public charity. We connect, support, and empower women through our virtual platforms and in-person community networks. If you feel inspired to become a supporter, please visit www.sherecovers.org. And I'm just, as I said, delighted to introduce you to our dear friend, Dufflyn Lammers. Some of you may be familiar because we often share her one woman kind of spoken word presentation that she did at She Recovers in LA. And if you're not familiar with it, I will drop the link in the chat today. It's just beautiful. And she performed that at She Recovers in LA at the Beverly Hilton Hotel when we did She Recovers in LA in May 2018, or September 2018. So Dufflyn is a relationship and recovery coach, a writer, and a speaker. She has extensive experience with addiction and is an expert in relationship and intimacy disorders. She works with women who are struggling with fears of abandonment and or fears of intimacy. She's expert at helping women to embody their highest energy. She empowers her clients to embrace self-responsibility, clarity, and the security of abundance. Her approach is client-led and non-judgmental. She leads workshops using improv games and creative writing to teach essential skills both online and in person. In addition to her training as a certified professional coach and a certified Arise interventionist, she spent a year apprenticed to renowned neo-tantra teacher Don Cartwright. Dufflyn lives in Paris, France, and works remotely with clients all over the globe. She's published in the LA Times, Adelaide, Santa Fe Writers Project, Iowa Women, and more. Her essay, Tinder in Paris, won a silver medal in the love story category for the 12th Annual Solus Awards 2018. Lammers co-edited the spoken word anthology Chorus with Saul Williams in 2014, and she's appeared on Russell Simmons' Deaf Poetry Jam on HBO, Criminal Minds, CBS, Entourage, HBO, and in Belly from Artisan Films. Her one-woman show, Discovered, was a 2017 Duende Distinction Award nominee in its debut at the Hollywood Fringe Festival. She is now at work on a memoir, and her personal website is www.dufflyn.com. And I'll share those links as well. Dufflyn, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. Dufflyn was just coach facilitating yesterday, and here she is again. We're just delighted to have you and always look forward to hearing from you. So over to you.
Oh, amazing. Thank you for that awesome introduction. Thank you, Dawn. And I'm so happy to be back again today. We had such a great meeting last night. You know, I've been doing this theme of women's intimacy every time I host, and I feel like we go deeper every single time. And the women are just so brave and so vulnerable and so real and so honest and so supportive of one another. It's extraordinary. And this is, you know, my primary focus at this point in my career is sharing what I've learned through both education and experience to inspire other women in recovery. That's what I'm about. And I do that through a mixture of one-to-one coaching, as well as the group facilitation, the literature, the lectures, the online courses, all of that kind of stuff. For me, it's about giving my clients a container in which they can develop the tools that they need to become secure in both relationships and recovery. And I share a lot of my personal story because I'm also a storyteller. So language is really important to me. And I wanted to start out just by saying, I feel like I could say I work with love addiction. I could say attachment disorder. I could say relationship issues. I could say intimacy disorder. Whatever words we choose, the problems we're talking about are the same. While we do sometimes use the language of addiction when referring to love, there's at least one major feature that distinguishes love from the kinds of substance-based addictions that we're typically talking about when we say addiction. Nearly everyone aspires to fall in love at least once in their life. right? Now, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that not one person ever has ever yearned to become a heroin addict, for example, or addicted to cigarettes or slot machines. So it might seem absurd at first to suggest that there could be a real similarity between lovers and genuine addicts. Another difference between substance addiction and relationship issues of the sort that we're going to discuss is that with the substance use disorder, a person has a relationship with an object, cocaine, alcohol, cigarettes. In terms of relationship and intimacy disorder, the person who's suffering has a relationship with another person, and that person responds. So there's a different dynamic, if that makes sense. There's a give and a take. In the last 10 years, there's been a really dramatic increase in published studies on the neurobiology and neurochemistry of romantic love. These studies, if taken together, suggest that the state of being in love is intimately tied to characteristic biochemical reactions occurring within the brain. So, your brain on love. What we each need to figure out for ourselves, and oftentimes with the help of a qualified professional, is where we're at on the link between maladjustment and the normal phase of evolution. It's becoming more and more evident now, though, that those mind-altering substances can be exogenous, which is to say coming from outside your body, like alcohol, heroin, cigarettes, or endogenous, which is to say coming from inside your body, like dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin. There's still a lot of debate about that, but it's gaining more and more momentum. And I'm simplifying the brain stuff so that for the sake of our conversation here, because I want to take up too much time with it, but I'm happy to direct people to further reading if they're interested. What we need to know about that, just in a really basic, simple way, is the human brain is programmed to incentivize behaviors that contribute to survival. So the reward center of the brain, which is also called the lizard brain, it rewards eating and sexuality with powerful pleasure incentives. So cocaine, alcohol, and other drugs subvert or hijack those pleasure systems and cause the brain to think a drug high is necessary for survival. Like, if I don't get this, I'm gonna die. Evidence is now really strong that natural rewards, such as food and sex, affect that reward system in the same way that drugs do. There was a 2002 fMRI study showing that the brain in love lights up the same areas as the brain on cocaine. In fact, food, sex, money, and love all read as survival to that lizard brain. So what does that look like? In terms of how this shows up in our lives, I have a very simple way of looking at it. And again, this for me is about, just using everyday language. So there are generally two sides to intimacy disorders: addiction and avoidance. I like to call it come here and go away. So for the avoidant person, the go away person, the fear of intimacy is primary. They feel overwhelmed and fear that they will lose themselves in the relationship. For the addicted person, the come here person, the fear of abandonment is primary. And so for that person, they fear losing the relationship itself. Some of us also fluctuate between the two in order to manage the emotions, but that's a very basic way of looking at it. One of the hallmarks of insecure attachment is jealousy. And that, for me personally, has been quite an odyssey. I remember as a teenager writing an essay about Othello, the play by Shakespeare. And my professor was so impressed with me because I realized that Iago, the villain, was so great at inciting jealousy in others because he was jealous. I wasn't a genius. I just was intimately acquainted with the green-eyed monster that doth mock the meat it feeds on. So until I met my now partner, I never had the skills to really deal with that because it felt so overwhelming. If my boyfriends had any connection with a woman or even looked at a woman, I would feel so insecure and so angry and felt like they were going to leave and I was going to die. So now I understand from the brain chemistry point of view and from an attachment point of view, and I can see why, but what could I do? And I had read this book called Women Who Love Too Much, and I knew I was one of them, but I didn't know how to stop loving so much. So instead I drank. And that worked until it didn't work. I couldn't see how I kept getting myself into what felt like the same horrible situation again and again. And I knew I was insecure because my mom left when I was 4, but I didn't know what to do about it. So right from the start, we can see how relationships begin if we look at those patterns and cycles. And this comes from Pia Melody. She is the founder and director of the Meadows Treatment Center in Arizona. And so she's created this chart which really reveals what those characteristics look like. So it's a chart essentially which lists the characteristics of an addictive relationship and a healthy relationship. And I'm changing that language a little bit because, like I said, I'm a writer, I'm a storyteller. Language is important for me. And I've recently been informed that the word healthy has a racial bias and a connotation in it. So I'm changing this a little bit, and you know, I feel like none of us really like being labeled or pathologized, right? So here's how I'm going to put it. Characteristics of a less conscious or maladaptive relationship. So this is where the relationship is based on need. The relationship is driven by a feeling of being incomplete or flawed without a partner. The relationship is based on who you want the other person to be. Chemistry is the top priority in the beginning, and your life becomes about the relationship. You fall in love with love. You seek to rescue or be rescued. You fail to set healthy boundaries. You look outward for another to fix, fill, or complete you. You may have one or more people lined up in case the current relationship ends, and you find emotionally unavailable or abusive partners. I don't know if that's lighting up anything for any of you, but I used to really identify with this. And, you know, I'm in recovery, so a lot of that has changed, but she really nails it. So let's look at the characteristics of more conscious, secure relationships. So this is what we want. This is what we're aiming for. The relationship is based on desire. The relationship is based on feeling sufficient and whole with or without a partner. The relationship is based on who the other person actually is, rather than who we wish they were. Chemistry is one among several priorities. The relationship enhances your goals and commitments for your life. You fall in love with the person. You seek a relationship between equal, capable individuals. You insist on healthy boundaries. Your love flows from inside based on feelings of sufficiency. You focus on the relationship without needing a ready replacement should it end. And you find emotionally available partners who treat you well. Sounds good to me. So there are so many variables which determine how we operate in relationships. And how do we know when our behavior has crossed a line from being occasionally problematic into that realm of addiction? It's rarely possible to identify a discrete point where that crossover actually happens. You know, like, oh, there it was, I crossed the line. It's not that easy, but in general, there are 4 primary criteria that define addiction, and this comes from Patrick Carnes's work. So the first one is obsession, an intense, abnormal, preoccupying focus on someone or something. Most of us can identify with that. So compulsion is the second one. This is the hallmark of any addiction, and the term describes being compelled or driven to use a substance or participate in a behavior, even when the person doesn't want to. Continuing despite negative consequences. This is the kicker, because this phrase is included in the American Society of Addiction Medicine's definition of addiction, as well as the DSM, which is a diagnostic manual that psychologists use. Persisting in a behavior in the face of detrimental consequences is one of the clearest observable signs of addiction. And then the last one is tolerance. So the concept of tolerance is most easily applied to the use of alcohol or other substances when repeated consumption requires more and more to get the same results. Clinical observation has led many therapists who treat addiction to believe the same phenomenon also happens with behaviors. So this is what happens when that pleasure center of the brain eventually becomes accustomed to the neurochemical bath of hormones precipitated by certain behaviors. So a lover might be suffering from a type of addiction if she expresses attachment behaviors such that her quest for love interferes with her ability to participate in the ordinary functions of everyday life, disables her from experiencing conscious relationships, or carries other clear negative consequences for herself or others. In the case of more ordinary examples of love, those ones that we probably do aspire to, these feelings or behaviors and ill consequences are not present, or they're present but only to a mild or manageable degree. I'll say this: the easiest way to spot a problem is to try stopping the behavior and see what happens. So how do we heal from this? In my free e-workbook, the one thing you need to stop doing right now if you want healthy relationships and what to replace it with, I'm talking about love addiction. I'm just not using those words. So this is a great place to start in terms of identifying some of your own stumbling blocks, especially if, you know, some of what I'm saying here is ringing a bell for you. One thing to note about this is that, like any maladaptive coping mechanism, when you put down one thing, you have to pick up something else. So in that e-workbook, I talk about the 4 A's: attractive, appropriate, available, and abundant, as a guideline for choosing partners, but also for what we want to cultivate and aim for in ourselves. So, of course, in order to set standards and honor them, we need self-esteem. And this is the crux of the whole thing. How can we create more self-esteem for ourselves? How can we begin to feel worthy? So some people suggest that esteemable acts will create that. And I feel like it's necessary to point out that esteemable acts are great, but not only in service to others, in service to ourselves. Acts of self-love are what's necessary. And that can be anything from a new exercise routine to a meditation practice to setting those boundaries with others that we know we need, taking oneself out on a date to one's favorite place, alone, you know, just you with you, really showering ourselves with love. And the way I work with clients is that I take them through a process of identifying their own particular stumbling blocks, looking at their history, patterns, cycles, past relationships, and also cultural influences and family of origin, as well as attachment, because all of this influences how we love. And the cultural influences are particularly important for women, because when we're marginalized, we find ways to rebel. When we feel disempowered, we find ways to fight back, and they may not always be working for us. We need to stand up for ourselves, but at the same time, that sort of subversive, passive-aggressive behavior that we sometimes turn to can end up hurting more than helping. There's usually a period of withdrawal, like with any maladaptive coping mechanism. When we stop doing it, we're going to feel bad for a while because we have to grieve that and let it go with love, and that's a process. So then we start to look at needs and wants and experiencing our reality as it is, rather than through the lens of old experience. So we talk about what conscious relationships look like and develop a vision for a new reality, and clients begin to have an experience of that. And as my clients grow, we celebrate her victories and assets. And this is how we build that self-esteem, right? Is really seeing what we did right, and being grateful for our progress. And I feel like the group work too is super important to reducing shame, which is one of the reasons I love hosting the She Recovers gatherings. And I always do that theme of women's intimacy, because we all just need a safe place to share about that, so we can see that we're not alone. And then eventually we create a dating plan or a relationship plan. And this is a living document. It can be fluid, it evolves over time, and we go through the experiences in real time together. So as a woman is following that dating plan or that relationship plan for the first time, you know, we talk about, okay, how did that work out? Did it feel good for you? What did you struggle with? You know, those kinds of things. So this is where the deepest learning actually begins, because each woman has to decide for herself what works and what doesn't, to learn from her own experience what feels good for her. And I feel like that's just so important. Like, I remember in my own recovery, people could tell me, don't touch the hot stove, you know, but I had to get burned myself and then process that experience honestly with someone before I could really believe it. And no, actually, Dufflyn, you're not the exception. The stove is going to burn you just like it burned everybody else. But each woman can do that with support and guidance, and with someone who will tell her what she needs to hear rather than what she wants to hear, someone that she trusts and who's there to listen and hold space for her, and who's going to help her set goals and hold her accountable. Actually, I recently had a client who has been caught up with a guy who's stringing her along, and she's been having a really hard time walking away from him. And I can understand that. I can relate to that because I've been there. Years ago, I was friends with a group of men and there were 7 of them. I could have dated any one of the 7 except the one that I wanted, naturally. So for about a year, I was with these 7 guys constantly, and I learned so much about men in that experience. And I wouldn't trade it for the world, but it was incredibly painful because the entire time I was secretly in love with this one guy, and he would flirt with me now and then and do things to make me think I might have a chance because he enjoyed the attention. And God bless him, you know what? Why shouldn't he enjoy the attention? You know, but he had no intention of ever asking me out. And I just couldn't see that, you know, that the question, we talk about availability, you know, and chasing unavailable partners. He may or may not be available to someone else. He was not available to me, because if he was, he would have been asking me out, and he didn't. And, you know, I could see that this was blocking me from being open to other men, but I was caught in the obsession and I couldn't let it go. And I finally had to just tell him what was up, and that broke the spell. So the obsession lifted with the clarity. So for my client, you know, we tried a few things to spark more attraction with this guy, but the truth was that it became more important for her to end the obsession at some point than it was to create more attraction with this guy, because the obsession was running her life. Her emotional life. She was making all sorts of decisions about where to live and what job to take and canceling dates with friends based on this guy and his occasional showing up. So clarity is the way to break that. Honesty and sincerity is incredibly underrated. And in the process, she can look at, okay, how did you get yourself into this situation? And what would you do differently next time? And what can you learn from this? So that's a little bit about, you know, just sort of what is love addiction? What does it look like? And how can we start to heal it? And yay, ladies. So I just kind of want to open it up now for questions and discussion, comments, whatever, and see what you guys have to say.
So thank you so much. I just think that, you know, I call it love addiction, and I get that it has all these different names and there's all these different things attached to it, speaking of attachment. But I have my own love addiction story.
I've written a whole memoir